Earlier this year, we discussed the 3 types of millionaires, which for those who didn't catch that video, basically boiled down to those who primarily built their wealth by focusing on maximizing their incomes, either with high-end careers and promotions, a business or side hustle, or some combination of the two, those who built their wealth by learning how to make the money they already had make more money for them, usually through sophisticated investing strategies and oftentimes a fair bit of leverage, and those who built their wealth by making the most out of every dollar that came in the door. We called these 3 types of millionaires the hustler, the investor, and the optimizer, respectively. And that's great for a high-level view, but it doesn't provide much detail in terms of the skills and personalities that might make someone well-suited for one or the other. Because while just about every millionaire will utilize bits and pieces of all 3 archetypes, most also tend to favor 1 or 2 of them above the rest. For instance, a millionaire may be really good at stretching their budgets without negatively impacting their lifestyle or enjoyment. And as a result, they may have a fair amount of money left over to invest each month. But just because they're investing money consistently doesn't necessarily mean that they fall primarily under the investor archetype. It's possible they're a bit more cautious and risk-averse when it comes to their investment decisions. So they may not utilize strategies like options trading or day trading or invest in things like cryptocurrencies or penny stocks. The very thought of doing things like that might very well freak them out. And so they may be much more content to simply spread their money across a few different index funds and be done with it. This would be a clear example of an optimizer who happens to invest. And the skill sets of that type of millionaire can be pretty different from someone who primarily falls under the investor or hustler archetypes. However, it doesn't seem as if the qualities that make those different archetypes successful when it comes to building wealth are all that different. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a deeper dive, looking at the various studies that have been done over the years and trying our best to discover what some of the key qualities are among the majority of modern successful wealth builders. Let's get started. But before we get going, be sure to like this video if you haven't already, as it really does help out the channel a lot, and subscribe with notifications on for more money-related videos like this one every single week. And if you want to further support this channel, you can check out some of the links I've left in the description below, which includes a link to my Patreon page. This is the best way to show your support for this channel, and in addition to that, you can also get early access to new videos and exclusive content such as spreadsheets based off the ideas we discuss in these videos. The spreadsheets will allow you to play with your own numbers and see how big of a difference some of the ideas we discuss can make for your own personal financial situation. So we're going to be discussing 6 main qualities today. It's by no means an exhaustive list, nor are all 6 qualities universally possessed by successful wealth builders, but they do seem to be fairly common among the majority of them. And I think it does give us a good starting point when determining how to best build wealth for ourselves. The 6 qualities are honesty, social skills and connectedness, self-awareness and control, long-term thinking, a winning attitude, and consistency. Let's take a look at each of these qualities in a bit more detail. Honesty, both with yourself and others, is so incredibly crucial, regardless of which wealth building archetype you fall under. The ability to keep our egos in check and be willing to admit when we're wrong, or just don't know the answer, can genuinely make a world of difference in a ton of situations. Keeping our egos in check allows us to better see things as they are, and thus make more rational and well-informed decisions, which can be helpful to any wealth builder. Being willing to admit when we're wrong, or just don't know the answer, can enable us to accomplish a couple of things. First, we'll be more willing to take time and seek out additional options and information, instead of just making choices blindly based on the information we have available to us at the time. This can help to ensure that we don't miss opportunities that are already available to us, even if those opportunities aren't entirely obvious at first. For example, something like house hacking, or even moving into a more expensive place that's closer to work to cut down on transportation costs, don't always immediately come to mind. But in some cases, they can work remarkably well for optimizers. Investors and hustlers can receive similar benefits by discovering new investing strategies or products and service opportunities available to them within their market, or even a neighboring one. Second, we'll probably be more willing to seek out advice from others, either directly or indirectly through things like books, podcasts, classes, or videos, and be far more capable of meaningfully implementing any good feedback or insights we do receive from them into our lives. This allows us to improve over time and become far more valuable in the workplace and beyond, which can lead to us commanding higher salaries, making more money on our investments, or becoming more financially efficient. In a lot of cases, it's a combination of those things. But to find those opportunities, we've got to be willing to take time to look for them. And this does seem to be a common trait among successful wealth builders. Thomas Corley's research found that roughly 88% of millionaires spend at least 30 minutes per day on average reading for self-improvement. And as you can imagine, this focus on self-improvement and finding new opportunities can lead to many other perks, again, financial and otherwise. One of those other perks is a much larger potential network of social connections. And as we all know, social connections, and social skills in general, really, are such an important part of life whether you're looking to build wealth or not. But it does seem as if most who do build wealth also take time to form these connections and build these skills. After all, it's pretty tough to get meaningful feedback from others if you're constantly isolating yourself. Beyond that, working together with someone else toward a shared goal can significantly improve our chances of success. Not only does it mean that you can share feedback and insights, but you also have some form of support to turn to when things are rough. And given how long of a road building significant wealth is for most millionaires, most studies show it takes roughly 3 decades on average for someone to become a millionaire, there are bound to be some bumps along the way. Perhaps it should come as no surprise then that statistically, the vast majority of millionaires are married. According to the National Study of Millionaires conducted by Ramsey Solutions and featured in Chris Hogan's book, Everyday Millionaires, found that about 80% of the over 10,000 millionaire respondents were married. And about 63% of the respondents were still in their first marriage. Other studies have echoed these findings with similar results. The U.S. Trust's Insight on Wealth and Worth study, for instance, found that roughly 86% of millionaires they surveyed were married, with roughly 65% of the respondents saying they were still on their first marriage. Now, that doesn't mean that marriage is a prerequisite for building wealth. After all, if roughly 8 in 10 millionaires are married, that also means that roughly 2 in 10 aren't. But it does suggest that having those social connections, in whatever form they may take, probably helps. So for those who aren't married, attending events like FinCon can be a great way to meet like-minded people and build that social network. But to get the most out of our wealth-building journey, we need to be able to understand ourselves. We need to be aware of who we are and what we really want and need out of life so that we can later make effective plans to go get those things. So essentially, we need some well-defined priorities. We also need to be aware of any triggers that we may have so we don't lose control and shoot ourselves in the foot in a crucial moment. This is particularly important nowadays because there are so many distractions in the world. And as our collective understanding of human psychology grows and the tools available to marketers become ever more sophisticated, these distractions are probably only going to become more effective and more focused. And that goes for all 3 millionaire archetypes. It's crucial for optimizers, of course, who often don't have as much risk tolerance or as much income to fall back on should their discipline fail them in a major way, but it's also crucial for investors. We've seen how emotional trades can quickly eat into profits. The behavior gap is a thing after all. And it's just as crucial for hustlers, particularly when they're at the negotiation table or looking to start a promising new venture. Not to mention that we don't really want to be the person who successfully stockpiles a ton of money, but did it for all the wrong reasons and ends up not really knowing how to enjoy their success. That would be pretty anticlimactic. And if studies like Fidelity's annual Millionaire Outlook survey are to be believed, it does happen frequently enough to be a real concern. So yeah, understanding ourselves is very important. In addition to that, it's important to be executing a well-thought-out, long-term plan. Because all the honesty, social connections, and self-awareness in the world can only get us so far if we're just living for today. Things like going to college and diversifying your revenue streams and investments are all long-term plays that a majority of millionaires have made, even if the short-term payoffs are sometimes less than stellar. Depending on the study you read, anywhere from around 75 to 95% of millionaires seem to have gone to college. Most graduated with at least a bachelor's degree. Most millionaires also have multiple streams of income. According to Thomas Corley of Rich Habits, roughly 65% of millionaires had at least 3 income streams. Other studies have suggested that the average millionaire has 7 income streams. This can prove particularly crucial during a down market should the millionaire get laid off and lose 1 or 2 of those streams. It'll allow them to survive longer without depleting their savings, or worse, going backward by getting into debt. And of course, diversifying your investments is important for long-term wealth building as well, because I think we can all appreciate the importance of not having all of our eggs in one basket. Having well-thought-out plans in place also makes you more prepared to handle unfortunate events. Sure, we can't predict everything, but as we discussed a minute ago, we can predict quite a few things that come up and figure out how to either avoid them entirely, or at least manage them if they do come up, as opposed to trying to figure it out in the moment when our emotions are raging and we're more likely to make silly mistakes. But I also think there's a bit more to it than that. Sure, putting a plan together that'll give us multiple streams of income and diversifying our investments so that we don't lose everything in one fell swoop is important. But it's also crucial to combine it with the personal side of personal finance. Basically, the plan needs to be aligned with our values, which is something that often takes some trial and error to really figure out, and is another reason why trying to be more self-aware is important. But anyway, there's a couple of reasons I think putting some added emphasis on the personal side of personal finance is important. First, having well-defined priorities, financial and otherwise, with a plan that's aligned with your values makes it easier to stay positive, optimistic, and resilient when the inevitable setbacks that we all experience from time to time come up. Second, you're probably more likely to be passionate and enthusiastic about what you're doing when you know and are behind why you're doing it. And that winning attitude can have its own benefits, such as making it easier for you to continue learning about your field and improving your craft. Having probably better health, which is consistently ranked as one of the biggest concerns for millionaires and non-millionaires alike, and of course making you more content and less likely to suffer from the disease of more overall. The disease of more often manifests itself in out-of-control lifestyle creep, which can be detrimental to anyone's financial health. And it did seem like millionaires have managed to avoid this trap for the most part, with only 7% of respondents in the National Study of Millionaires saying they felt pressure to keep up with the Joneses. Now, whether that's because of the things we've been talking about or not, I can't say for sure, but based on my own personal experiences, I could see it at least playing a role. I could also see there being a difference in the amount of work-related discretionary expenses. For example, someone might go out to eat a few times a week essentially to make up for the long, hard days at a job that they don't really like. Or they may take more extravagant and pricey vacations to recover from the stresses of that work life. I mean, sure, even the most passionate people will treat themselves occasionally after a long day or take a vacation, but it may not be quite as frequent or quite as lavish, or maybe even both, as they otherwise would have. And that adds up over time. Not to mention that it lowers your burn rate, which makes bouncing back from those occasional setbacks quickly much easier. Even if it doesn't have any of those effects, that optimism, positivity, and passion can still be extremely beneficial. I mean, think about it. Isn't it a lot easier and more enjoyable to work with someone who has a positive attitude, whether in the office or in terms of a business arrangement? Of course it is. And this can lead to the more enthusiastic, energetic, and optimistic people getting more promotions and better raises, closing more business deals, or just not getting laid off quite as quickly during an economic downturn. Assuming, of course, that the enthusiastic individual is at least reasonably qualified for the job in comparison to other candidates. I mean, if you're totally outclassed by the competition, then you're totally outclassed. That's why the self-improvement part we discussed in the honesty section is still important. Some studies have also suggested that those who are more positive and optimistic may be more likely to take risks and experiment with new ideas. This may lead to them being more likely to invest, particularly during economic hard times, which is often when the real money is made for investors, as they're less pessimistic about the long-term future of the economy. Or perhaps they're more likely to try a new side hustle, as they believe there's a realistic possibility of it growing into something bigger, financially or otherwise. Or maybe it's something as simple as being more willing to experiment with different products, services, or activities to find alternatives in their budget and save more money. And finally, those who manage to build significant amounts of wealth are usually fairly consistent. And perhaps the best way to be consistent when it comes to saving and investing is to make the decision automatic. There have been several studies of willpower over the years, and it's become pretty clear that we have only so much of it available to us at any given time. So it should come as no surprise that the majority of millionaires make their savings and investing decisions as automatic as possible, through things such as an automatic 401k deposit from a paycheck. After all, it's much harder to spend money that you never see. So we can go on all day about specific strategies for building wealth. We can discuss the importance of keeping a low burn rate, diversifying our revenue streams, and how to invest to get strong and reasonably stable returns, and we should. Those are important things to know, and for finance nerds like me, they're fun to talk about. But it's also important to understand that all of those things really only work if we, as individual wealth builders, are setting ourselves up for success, both now and down the road. Because there will inevitably be setbacks in every millionaire's journey, so we need to ensure that we're ready to handle them. Not just through things like insurance coverage, a fancy LinkedIn profile, or diversification, but also through our own personal development. And I think that these qualities, while not complete, are a good starting point for us to work on that'll help us ensure that we make the most out of what we have and what we can yet gain. If we're honest with ourselves and open to self-improvement, we can fill in the gaps in our knowledge and our skill sets. If we take the time and effort to build a strong social network of like-minded individuals, we'll probably have somewhere to turn when we need help. If we can better understand ourselves, we'll be better able to craft a strong life plan that takes into account our personalities, our wants, our needs, our dreams, and our finances. And we'll be less likely to shoot ourselves in the foot along the way. The same can be said if we're thinking long-term. A winning attitude can help us be more resilient as individuals in a myriad of ways, and it goes a long way towards helping build that social network as well. And finally, if we're consistent with all of these qualities, our chances of successfully building significant amounts of wealth will soar, regardless of whether we're doing it primarily as hustlers, investors, or optimizers. But like I said, this list is by no means comprehensive. So what other qualities do you feel have been important to you on your own wealth building journey? Let me know in the comment section below, and let's get this discussion going. But that'll do it for me today. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button if you haven't already, subscribe, and hit that bell next to my name so you'll be notified of all my future uploads. I generally upload every single Monday, and if you have a friend that would be interested in this kind of content, be sure to share it with them. Let's really get this information out there and start our own financial revolution.